Thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us for this second episode of Planet First Action and part 2 of our sit-down interview with Newlab CEO Cam Lawrence. And in just a moment, we'll continue our conversation with Cam. My name is Jacob Frost.
And I'm Ryan Gordon.
And we are your hosts. And this is a show, this Planet First Action, this is a show about what's happening on the front lines of sustainability and climate action, and learning from the leaders who are in the trenches and making it happen. Leaders like Cam Lawrence. It's about breaking down silos between communities and businesses, investors and policymakers, really across stakeholder groups, to enable shared understanding and to facilitate action so that we can achieve a just and equitable energy transition. And regardless of who you are or what field you work in or where you are in your sustainability journey, there is going to be something valuable that you can learn. And on that note, thank you so much to everyone who has listened and subscribed following our premiere episode last Wednesday, featuring part 1 of our conversation with Cam. It was a fantastic conversation and the response has been amazing, and we have even more of the same in store tonight. And with that, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and please let us know your thoughts and questions in the comments.
Absolutely. And last week, we covered Newlab's place-based approach, its secret sauce, plans for the future, the importance of stories, and so much more. Cam shared such valuable insights and perspectives. If you hadn't had a chance to listen, we encourage you to do so before today's episode. Now, I know it's July 3rd, tomorrow is the 4th. Most of you are probably traveling or spending time with your family, friends, and loved ones, but no matter where you are spending the holiday, be it in a city, in your apartment, or out in the country, or for that matter, out of the country, if you can find that half hour, you will not regret it.
That is true, and we definitely encourage you to listen to part 1 first. But to what you just said, I cannot believe that it is already July 4th. I mean, I will say I am extremely excited because it is one of my most favorite holidays. And I'm sure it is for many of you all that are listening in as well. It brings together the family, and honestly, the whole neighborhood comes together. You have to love watching the fireworks, unless, of course, you are my dogs, who find them completely terrifying. And as someone from the country who grew up on a farm, I can tell you I especially love July 4th because it means good barbecue, swimming pools, and warm weather. And just thinking about it, I can practically smell the burgers and the ribs cooking right now.
No, it is so true. The food is so good during this holidays, and thinking back on July 4th over the years, I have some great memories. And funny enough, there's always one thing that really stands out and stays with me. I can tell you guys, growing up, when my family was together hanging out, there was always someone in charge of the music, and for me, it was my dad. The house rules were simple, as I'm sure it was for many of you listening in. Don't touch the thermostat, turn off the lights, and don't mess with the stereo when he's playing his music. And invariably, there's going to be some Smokey Robinson, some Marvin Gaye, or the Temptations playing. Now, what did all of these legendary artists who gave us hits after hits after hits that people still love and listen to today have in common? If you said recording on Motown Records, you are right. I can tell you, Jay, Motown record label was a pretty big spot in my memory growing up.
I know, and I'm absolutely certain for so many of you listening in, Motown has that same special place in your hearts and memories as it does for people across the world. Motown truly changed culture, and its impact is a core piece of Detroit's legacy.
Absolutely, and speaking of legacy, what cultural forces and icons those artists and songs really are. I mean, I can still remember going to Players Club on Franklin Street at UNC Chapel Hill, and Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On will be playing at the end of every single night. And if you play My Girl or Papa Was a Rolling Stone by the Temptations, people are just going to sing. I mean, Michael Jackson launched his first solo record on Motown.
That's true. And it's the thing is that it's not just anybody. Everybody from the silent generation all the way to Gen Z, they know and they love these Motown records. I mean, you have Jackson 5's I Want You Back, the one and only, signed, sealed, delivered by the legendary Stevie Wonder, Stop in the Name of Love by the Supremes. I mean, I could stop this whole conversation right now and just spend time listening to those songs because they really are amazing. The roster of Motown artists is unbelievable, and to see them all calling the same place home, even more so. Although, I will admit, the younger generations don't always know who the original artists were, and I will absolutely plead guilty here because I thought until very recently that Who's Lovin' You was just originally by the Jackson 5 rather than Smokey Robinson, who I just learned wrote it when he was 18.
I know, that is absolutely incredible. I mean, when I start thinking back about what I was doing when I was 18, it was certainly not writing new records. Not at all. Not. Yeah, definitely. So I know that these are our favorites and that you all listening might actually have some of your own. But if you're at a wedding this week or a party, or you're going to hear one of these hits. Now, some of you listening in may already know this, but it all comes down to the legendary Berry Gordy Jr., Motown's founder, back where the label calls home, Detroit, the Motor City. Now, between 1961 and 1971, Motown had 110 top 10 hits, and a lot of that success was driven by the way they actually made music. What I didn't know until digging into this just recently was that the process Berry came up with was actually heavily inspired by working on an automotive factory line.
I know, and we were talking about this. We could probably spend the rest of the time talking about just how amazing Berry Gordy Jr.'s process was and how important that process was just to the community, because he truly is a legend. I mean, just a few years ago, he was given the highest award one can receive in the U.S. for his contribution to culture, the Kennedy Center Honors. And that's the thing. It's not just the music with Detroit. Even if you aren't a car enthusiast, Detroit is also about the cars. After all, it is the Motor City, the birthplace of Oldsmobile, of General Motors, of Chrysler, of Dodge, and of course, Ford.
It's true. Detroit is synonymous with cars and cars with Detroit. Detroit specifically has had a unique role in the creation of American culture, our modern economy, and indeed global society writ large.
And what's amazing is doing more reading into the history, something that many people, and maybe especially the younger generations, may not know, is that the role that Detroit has played because of its unique capacity, its unique attributes, and its capabilities. And Cam said it perfectly in part one of our sit-down interview, and here's the clip.
And back to the themes, so, the place-based kind of competitive advantage. There's an amazing workforce in Detroit. They know how to build stuff. They know how mobility, how to maintain a competitive advantage in mobility. So
that's right, and that unique ability and role in history goes to another moniker that Detroit has, coined by Franklin D. Roosevelt himself as the Arsenal of Democracy, which I just think is an amazing name. But it was actually coined during World War II when 91% of all Army helmets were actually stamped in Detroit. Chrysler's Arsenal plant in Warren, Michigan, created half of the tanks made in the U.S. By the summer of 1944, Ford's Willow Run plant completed one B-24 bomber every hour, and GM was responsible for the greatest percentage of war material during that period. So when you sum all that up, the Detroit firms and their facilities across the country produced 25% of everything used by the Allies.
Not just the U.S., by all of the Allies. I mean, that is crazy.
It is literally it is insane when you start thinking about it. The amount of industry that was going on during that time. So another interesting bit of trivia for our listeners is that many corporate head honchos became high-ranking Army officers in order to get around bureaucratic red tape. Thinking about trying to do that today is absolutely mind-boggling.
That's true, and it just goes to highlight what we really do need more of, what they decided to do in that time of crisis. And it's a key mission of Planet First Action, which is not trying to find ways to get around bureaucratic red tape, but specifically to be able to drive that cross-stakeholder collaboration and partnership, because that is what is essential for action to take place. But again, looking through all of the history from Motown through the Arsenal of Democracy, Detroit is incredible and has an incredible history. And it goes back to what we discussed with Cam in part one, which is the mobilization of these cities, from Brooklyn and the Navy Yard to Detroit, cities that were engines of industry harnessed in the defense of the nation, now being called upon again to lead and face one of the biggest challenges of modern times, and frankly, to save the planet.
Yep, that's so true. Now, while many people may not know Detroit's backstory, most are familiar with its more recent and unfortunate history, and think of it only as a city in decline. Now, in 1992, the city's credit rating was actually labeled as junk status by Moody's. And in 2011, the census reported a 25% decline in population in just 10 years, putting it at its lowest level in over 100 years.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, gosh, maybe all of us that are listening in today and living today have a better sense of what that might look like because of the recent pandemic. But still, to think about a 25%, a quarter of the population going away in just 10 years, and for Detroit to be at a level of population the same as it was at the beginning of the 1900s, that's just crazy.
No, it's so true. And then again, when you start thinking about the 2013, the State Review Board determined that Detroit was in operational dysfunction, and then the city went into a technical default and ultimately filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy.
It is honestly an incredibly sad story. But when you go back a little bit further into the past, earlier in the story, the very early residents who chartered the city were perhaps particularly prescient because in 1827 they adopted the motto for Detroit of Speramus Meliora Resurget Cineribus. We hope for better things, it shall rise from the ashes. And that motto, it seems like that has certainly been the case, because what we appear to be witnessing right now is an incredible revival of a major city from the ashes back to a role of leading on the world stage. In fact, the World Economic Forum wrote just last year that cities worldwide can look to Detroit as an example of a city that has navigated hardship and come out on the other side stronger and positioned to build a thriving, sustainable, and innovation-positive economy.
No, it's absolutely true. And Startup Genome actually recently named Detroit as the #1 startup ecosystem. And there's a lot that has got into this Phoenix-like rebirth, more than we have time to cover. But it does come full circle with one of the largest and most consequential investments from Ford, a company that helped build the city in the first place.
That's right. And this revival of Detroit, this return from the ashes, and Ford's contributions to that, it brings to mind one of Henry Ford's quotes himself, that failure is only the opportunity to more intelligently begin again. And that goes to exactly what Ford is doing right now with the project that they began in 2018, what has become a $1 billion investment to renovate and reopen Michigan Central Station as a 30-acre technology campus focused on advanced mobility. And with that investment, Ford took what had become a symbol of Detroit's decline and fall, and to not only resurrect it, but to turn it into a symbol of hope and the future. Something that, again, is right in line with the spirit of Henry Ford. To quote him again, had said that for success is to do more for the world than the world does for you.
And what is really at the heart of this #1 startup ecosystem, at the very center of this newly renovated Mobility Innovation District, is none other than Newlab.
Exactly. Newlab, Detroit. And before we focus on what's inside, again, where it is, I mean, it doesn't get much better. Newlab, Detroit is in an absolute architectural gem that brings its history along with it. In the Albert Kahn-designed post office and book depository, a building that was first opened in 1936. After decades abandoned, it was the first building to open on Ford's $1 billion Mobility Innovation District. And in addition to the incredible work that Newlab is undertaking there today under the leadership of Cam Lawrence, just by being there, they are preserving a rich part of our collective culture and the history of Detroit.
And I have to say, that is something that can frequently be overlooked, but it is so, so important. And I am thrilled personally to see Newlab's leadership here, not just acknowledging our history, but the dedication to preserving history and culture and building on the legacy of these buildings. From the Navy Yard in Brooklyn to the new site in Detroit, now for an even bigger task of combating climate change.
That's exactly right. And again, for all of you listening in, and especially the entrepreneurs, the investors, and the policymakers, Newlab Detroit offers even more. Because beyond the aesthetic appeal, the history, and the practical benefits, comes some unique benefits for the startup community and the innovation industry. As Newlab Detroit is within a special transportation innovation zone, which enables startups to pilot their technologies under real-world conditions much, much faster and with an expedited permitting process.
That is so critical. I mean, it's something we know all too well working with our clients at the agency Gordon & Frost.
But I can just imagine, though, some of the people who are listening in who maybe aren't as so in the weeds of this industry are like, these guys are weird, getting excited about permitting. But it's true. I mean, that is a key element and a key blocker for a lot of these solutions to come to market, and to have that to offer that special transportation innovation zone is truly incredible for the startup community that is at Newlab Detroit. And then, besides where it is and the building itself, when it comes to what's inside the building, Cam shared some of this in our last discussion, and they brought that same approach from the Brooklyn Navy Yard up to Detroit, offering 270,000 square feet, state-of-the-art prototyping equipment and labs and collaboration spaces.
Yeah, Newlab Detroit has been on an absolute tear since opening a year ago. It opened in Michigan Central with 25 startups on April 25th, 2023, and it has since grown 320% to now having over 100 member startups. And in addition to being primarily focused on energy and mobility, startups at Newlab Detroit are turning the norms of the venture ecosystem on its head, with their commitment to the community, which is also at the heart of Planet First Action mission as well, truly engaging communities and supporting historically underserved and disadvantaged communities in order to ensure the energy transition has a representation from all and produces a more just and equitable outcomes.
And it's exactly right, because it is so important that there's a concerted focus on that. And that was one of the first questions we asked Cam during part 1. And as he shared, they are incredibly proud, and rightfully so, of the realization of their commitments to diversity and inclusion at Newlab Detroit. The stats do not lie. 51% of the startups at Newlab Detroit have at least one female, Black, or Latinx founder or CEO. And for those listening in, and especially for those who are not in this industry, who are not in the know about what the standards are, those numbers are truly remarkable. And that is what the team at Newlab brings under the leadership of Cam Lawrence, the commitment that is absolutely essential to address those challenges of underrepresentation in the industry.
That's right. And so not only have they just brought amazing success with them in creating these companies, but they've also made amazing strides in terms of being successfully able to raise capital and actually deploy that capital. Newlab Detroit member companies have actually collectively raised $688 million in venture capital, amounting to more than half of all venture capital raised in Michigan during 2022. Now let me say that again. Detroit Newlab member companies have collectively raised almost $700 million in venture capital. That amounts to more than half of all venture capital raised in Michigan during 2022. So Newlab and Michigan Central launched their first Founder Fellowship program in Detroit, collaborating with the state of Michigan. The fellowship supports a cohort of 5 climate tech founders from underrepresented backgrounds with $150,000 and additional resources they need in order to scale their companies.
And that's, again, it's so important. And it's the same thing we see with the recent federal legislation. This program by Newlab Detroit with Michigan Central is so exciting because it is important to have that deliberate, codified, and concerted effort to uplift disadvantaged and marginalized communities as a part of this energy transition, making them not just a part of the conversation, but key stakeholders that are driving and owning the solution.
And that is so important. And in addition to that, Michigan Central started the Scale Fund to help startups scale and pilot in Michigan, and together with Newlab have chosen 12 startups to receive the award to date.
I mean, looking at what they have accomplished, it is hard to believe that it has been only 1 year that they have been up in Detroit. Their impact on our communities, our planet, and our lives cannot be overstated. And that work is more and more important and more urgent every single day. Even today, we look at Hurricane Beryl and the catastrophic damage it has already caused. The earliest Category 5 hurricane in recorded history and a sign of a warming world. Our thoughts and prayers go to the residents of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to Jamaica, to all of those who are in the path to Union Island, and beyond that, to all of those who are affected by a changing climate. That is why we need organizations like Newlab, why we need leaders like Cam, to help bring these sustainability solutions and climate technologies to scale. And situated there at Ford's Mobility Innovation District, Newlab is at the very forefront of that leadership. This is history in the making. And that history is being created by an organization unlike any other, Newlab, under the leadership of Cam Lawrence, an organization which recognizes that hope is a consequence of action. And with that action, they are, in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and also now in Detroit, creating our future. The future isn't some far-off, distant reality. It is being built today by Newlab. And what's amazing about all of this is how it comes full circle. Because there were many so-called motor cities in the early 20th century in the U.S. and around the world, but according to the Detroit Historical Society, Detroit emerged above the rest because of its industrial leaders and innovators, established industries, access to resources and capital, manufacturing ability, and serendipitous relationships.
That's right. And so for those who listened to part 1 of Cam's interview, you'll recognize each of those attributes as what goes into making Newlab itself so special and so successful.
That's true. And what's more is that idea that in addition to having to have those essential ingredients, just how important it is to have the necessary leadership and vision. To quote John Quincy Adams, the 6th President of the United States, if your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, to become more, then you are a leader. And we are so glad that Cam has answered the call and brought his leadership and vision to bear in this most critical of work. And you can see and hear the amazing impact that leaders like Cam Lawrence and the team at Newlab, like the team at Michigan Central, like the team at Ford, can have on communities when you listen to the local community members react to the grand reopening of the Michigan Central train station last month, the building at the heart of the new tech campus where Newlab Detroit calls home. And when we come back, we'll have Cam Lawrence up here on stage with us to continue our conversation in this two-part interview. Here are those community members' voices captured by the incredible two-time Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Stephen McGee.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
One thing that we didn't get was tissues.
Why is that?
The amount of emotions happening in this room was just incredible.
As soon as they come out of the cube room, oh, somebody's in tears, just because they know how many times they've driven by it and how many times it's just looked so desolate and obsolete, and now it's just so beautiful and grand. It's like, man, they turned a page in Detroit history here.
I tip my hat to the magnificence of this station, this edifice, this magnificent structure of Detroit's history and future. This is a powerful statement of vision for Detroit. I salute you.
Do you think that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. Like, it's about your ability to actually raise and continue to actually generate profit, right? Mm-hmm. So, but do you think that sustainability is more or less kind of a must-have in these cases, or do you think it's just simply an add-on that people can kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a, I will say I'm probably a little bit more of a zealot, because I truly believe that in order to achieve net zero, what we have to do is basically retrofit every aspect, redesign every aspect of our economy with sustainability in mind. And so for me, it's if we're going to, ensure the continuation of life on Earth, this is something that has to be addressed. But the way I think it plays out is I don't think this is a situation where we're going to see, the next version of FANG stocks be climate stocks per se. But I think what you'll see is a lot of these companies that will design one aspect of the solution, and they'll get to a point and then get acquired by the bigger legacy companies. Will just say, okay, now I can retire one unsustainable aspect of what I'm doing and bolt in a sustainable alternative. And I think that's how this is going to work, and which is why deep tech in particular is so critically important. It's those component by component look at addressing the problem, and I think that's how we're going to get there. So to answer your question, different leaders will have different points of view. I think it's an absolutely fundamental imperative that we get there, and I think this is how we do it, by supporting hundreds of different companies that are each looking to solve their particular piece of the puzzle, and then inserting those puzzle pieces in to large corporates all along the way.
Fantastic.
You have such a unique position here yourself, but also Newlab as an organization, because you're sitting at this point where you're bringing together the startups that are really innovating these solutions, the corporate partners who are looking to drive corporate innovation, but also to, as you just mentioned, figure out how do they themselves be more sustainable. And you've done all of these things with the Newlab approach, bringing together industry, investment, corporate partners, to really tremendous success that Newlab is now looked at with a reverence for as a result. At a recent pilot showcase, though, Elise Neal, one of those partners from the corporate innovation side, referred to the Newlab process as one of shepherding, which brings to mind this idea of who actually, of all of the communities, the founders that are aspiring to be a part of the Newlab community, who actually ends up being able to join the flock, because there's only so many spaces, there's only so many desks here.
Oh, absolutely.
So with that being the case, beyond the sort of business fundamentals, the sort of more standard criteria that you would evaluate a startup that wants to join the community, what are some of the other things that you think about as a zealot, as a self-proclaimed zealot, though we don't think you're a zealot ourselves, though, when it comes to that sort of more mission orientation and the impact on local communities?
Yeah, no, for sure. We, in terms of our pipeline, we're very fortunate to have great relationships to, institutions of higher learning, venture capital community. So our pipeline of talent is just it's really rich. It's really really impressive, and I would love to open the doors to more than we currently are able to. But what that does, it keeps the bar coming in extremely high. So we'll assess the founder, just like a venture capital firm would. We're going through the pitch deck, we're assessing the founder themselves. So a small fraction of those that apply to get in are actually do come in. But then from there, we really try to do what we can to tilt the Newlab platform to their benefit to the greatest extent possible. Like helping them provide access to the infrastructure assets to get their product ready sooner than they would without us. Piloting opportunities where there's fit that we can lean in and help with, either within the Navy Yard or what I mentioned within Detroit, but also our corporate partners as well, where that makes sense. You mentioned shepherding, and that's exactly it. We do corporate innovation studios where we're partnering with large corporates. We're understanding their need case, their challenge area within climate, and then bringing the best startups from around the world to help address those challenges. And we're really focused on getting to a demonstrable outcome with that partner. And we've seen about 40% of our engagements result in further economic activity between the corporate and the startup. That's what we need to build and do at scale. Because if we can build those corporate innovation opportunities at a higher ratio between the number of startups and the pilots we're able to run, if we're getting to maybe a one pilot for every 2 startups ratio instead of the 1 to 10 or 1 to 15 it is now, then that flywheel will really start to turn. But yeah, to your question, we've got a very, very rich pipeline of startups, and that's part of what makes this community so special.
Yeah, enviable even.
Enviable, yeah.
Actually. So, and to that end, actually, it's really interesting because, I have some background in pharma and life sciences and these kinds of things. And when I start thinking about it, I start thinking about tech transfer, right?
Yeah,
because because at the end of the day, that is a very robust, very established, very worn track in terms of how do you actually take something from, national labs, how do you take something from what's coming from universities and higher learning and actually develop it into a product that actually gets approved and then actually starts to be commercialized, right? So, but really climate tech and sustainability doesn't actually have that same very defined, clear pathway.
Yep.
So what do you think, and I know that you actually have some background in life sciences as well. So with that kind of context in mind, what do you think is the best way to kind of either replicate that or adjust it in a way that actually, again, speeds up that transfer from basically, your idea, the workshop, into practical use?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I do have a background in life sciences, so your points were very well received. But here, that's part of maybe not tech transfer in the biotech lens, but tech transfer in terms of the transfer of talent is still very much in play. And that's where I was mentioning earlier, very very fortunate to have great relationships with the MITs of the world that are just an amazing pipeline of inspiring entrepreneurs that are looking to leave higher learning and actually get to work building their companies. And we've been fortunate enough to be one of the places that is a good home for folks like that. So not as much in the transfer of technology from the lab to a big pharma space, but from the talent, from the higher institution of higher learning into the Newlab to help them build out their companies. So it is working in a way that is similar. But with a little bit of a spin to it.
It's an interesting thing that you sort of mentioned there, because it is from a sort of a true linear approach. So you've got this amazing innovation that's going on at an MIT or in the national labs, and then you take that and what is the next phase of commercializing it? And
That's
you
right.
would think about, okay, well, let me go to Newlab. That'd be perfect for me. But there's also so many people, as we just talked about, that are in that pipeline that want to be here in these halls. For those who are thinking about this next phase, entering that next phase where they may want to be going to a place like Newlab, but maybe they need to spend a little bit more time finding product market fit or figuring out how to get the science where they really need it to get to make that application viable. What are some of the other things that you would suggest to them to think about before they maybe go and try to join the community here? Or you say just come here right now because that's the best way to get connected into the ecosystem?
Yeah, there's different approaches to this, right? You can there's a place for the incubator models where there's like a 12-week program and you're in a cohort, you're in and out, and we do that within the context of our founder fellows, and we've seen a lot of success around that. But that's more of a smaller program as opposed to the approach we take at scale. And our approach for those at scale is once you've got to the point where you know what you want to be when you grow up, we're going to get you here and you're going to build it. And we're not your finishing school. That's not, other people are really good at that. That's not where we want to lean in. For other founders earlier in the journey, that may be your right bet. Being part of a cohort, really fleshing out your product market fit, having some peers in kind of more of a classroom oriented approach to building companies. For us, we're better for those that are ready to go. And then we're going to help accelerate you.
Right. We need to find a new phrase other than stepping on the gas. I think it's something. It's something's got to be replace that. We're gonna put that on the Newlab team. So.
Yeah, one founder said, "You build, we unblock," and I think there's some art to that.
There you go. That's nice. That's nice. So let's think about the future. All right. Let's think about, okay, well, you have 5 years. You have 5 years. You have 12 years. We're gonna scale that back. There are some monumental things that are going to be happening within the next 6 months.
Sure.
So obviously, the elections come first to mind. Obviously, globally, we just saw actually what's happening in Germany, what's happening in France, obviously what's going on here in the U.S. We probably have never seen in this country a more consequential election that may be happening here. So with that in mind, how do you actually want to, and what kind of advice would you give companies that are in this kind of environment? To say, how do you actually prepare? We have CHIPS, we have the IRA, we have the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Like all these things are basically already baked in, but what is the next step if basically the administration changes and the ideas change?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, what choices the administration would, which direction they would go if there's an administration change, because I have been really encouraged by the current administration's decision-making process, as I think those of us in our industry would expect. The other aspect of it is there's been a pretty significant economic development story that's happened, that has been as a result of some of these initiatives and some of the work that Newlab and the companies that we support have been able to achieve. So I would like to be overly optimistic and say, hey, at the end of the day, driving economic growth should be a fairly bipartisan issue, but we shall see. Our approach, has been to, hope for the best and plan for, an opportunities where we have to look for more support outside of this country as well. And I do think, as you mentioned, a few other countries and the decisions that have been made in those regions, and I think that climate change is a less bipartisan issue in other regions, and the support for it and the understanding of the economic development impact that supporting climate-related economic growth can drive has become more and more apparent around the world, and it's part of how we're looking to expand. And the same can be said for the startups within Newlab here in the U.S. As your markets change, you need to make sure that as you're developing your product market fit, as you're going from prototype to small batch manufacturing to scale, go to where the customers are. And if the demand tap turns off here, look globally.
Yeah, it's interesting because it all boils down to kind of kitchen table politics, right?
That's right.
It's about jobs, jobs, jobs.
That's right.
So if you can actually, if we're creating new industry, if we're literally engaging new economic growth, and I mean, even here in this building, driving $4 billion worth of overall, growth and $12 billion of overall valuation, that's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of people who actually are really going to care and be inspired about what you guys are doing.
Well, and that's one of the stories that I love is, this is 84,000 square feet in Newlab, but what I will call the Newlab alumni that have grown beyond a desk to 2 desks within our space, and they get to that point where they're not trying to prototype anymore. They've got their prototype in another in small batch manufacturing, and then they've taken up space, in the broader community and here in the city. It's 1 million square feet that they've taken over now.
That's incredible.
There you go.
So this is the type of stuff that matters regardless of who's in the White House.
That's right.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing because there is a message of hope, especially for, as you mentioned, founders, especially where it's this lonely, sometimes lonely and very challenging job of bringing these innovative solutions to market, to think about that ecosystem of support, especially from the public sector. There's a lot of momentum behind it and keeping it in that place.
That's right.
And I think for us, we could not be, as we mentioned at the top, more thrilled to be partnering with Newlab when it comes to Planet First Action, because Planet First Action is really about bringing together different stakeholders that are doing great work, whether it's in the investors coming up with new financial models or instruments to actually close some of those gaps, or if it's the actual innovators themselves coming up with those new science, the new science and technologies that are helping to decarbonize systems. All of those, or the great policy that's being developed. There's great work, but what does it take to really bring it together to help action happen faster, sooner? You guys are, as we mentioned, the models of how do you convene effectively to promote real change. And with that being said, we are sitting here with you now at the helm of probably the most consequential organization in climate tech in New York City and probably the world. I think it's fair to say. And we're talking with an audience that's comprised of all those different types of stakeholders. Want to know, what is your message for each of them? And starting perhaps with the founders who maybe in an early stage are thinking about, how do I get past this pivot? Do I need to pivot? Do I need to get to this? How do I get into a new lab? What does it take to get to that next level? What would you share with them?
Yeah, just keep going. Keep going. I mean, being a founder, like we discussed, it's a lonely journey, and it's not for the faint of heart. The winners are the ones that show the greatest amount of resilience. And your work is critically important. That's why we're trying to build a platform that can help thousands of these founders at scale. And I would like to be able to bring in more than we can. And that means I need to have more of these than we have the 3 that we have today. So we've all, the message I give to them is the same message I have to give to myself, which is keep going. Keep going. Get up. You got knocked down, you got to get up again, right? And because the what we're trying to solve here is, it's the type of stuff that our grandchildren will be proud of if we get this right. It's too important for us to fail. So when it's hard, you just got to keep going.
Just keep going, and you're not alone. That's a great message. And I think to the other stakeholders who are maybe in a slightly different position, but are still thinking about things with no shortage of sort of challenges that they're facing, especially when it comes to fiscal responsibility, is the investors who are trying to think about, how do you understand all of these major megatrends that are changing the world, changing systems completely, and are maybe not ready to say, okay, I'm going to place my bets here where this whole thing is being changed. What is your message to them that are maybe not yet in the sort of climate space, but are looking to get into it?
I think it's easy. I mean, for me, it was hard for me to find my entry point into making an impact in sustainability until I stumbled across Newlab. But now that I'm in it, it's a lot easier than I thought. Because really what needs to happen is redesigning every aspect of our economy. And every large corporate right now is trying to find a way to get to their sustainability goals. How they're going to do that is retrofitting piece by piece of their organization. So they have to do it. The demand side is there. The consumer demand side is there. Ultimately, none of this happens unless the consumer stands up and says we need to change. This has to be better, and that's happening now. So the time is ripe for investors to make a lot of money on climate change, and especially in the early stage stuff. We've got a lot of amazing founders, over $3 billion in exits so far, and we haven't been around that long. The money is flowing, the valuations increases are happening. This is where you can get your 10 baggers if you're an investor. And if you're curious how, I'm here to help.
Message them say, maybe don't overcomplicate it. Actually follow the money, because that's where it's going. Yeah.
That's right. So thinking about that, and while that is absolutely so true and poignant, you also have to consider really kind of the next leg of the stool, which is basically policy.
Yeah.
So it's just critically important of like, how do you actually enable these things in order to kind of get up, stand up, and actually move as they need to? So what would your message be to them and these policymakers about how do you actually inspire and also kind of accelerate these kinds of businesses? Because at the end of the day, one of the biggest things that policymakers are so concerned about are unintended consequences.
Correct.
So how do you make sure that you're actually making the right call at the right time in order to stimulate the demand that you're trying to?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good concern around unintended consequences. I think I would, not to oversimplify it again, but if you do this right, you're driving economic development and jobs as well. So we've seen time and time again good policy enable startups to get to market quicker, make an impact quicker, and by the way, they're taxpayers. So all of that kind of ties together. But we've seen a lot of really interesting examples from our startup community, and in Detroit, some great examples. Like we have one company that's really focused on carbon capture through wastewater streams. And again, that is an amazing opportunity to make a significant climate impact. But in order to do that, we need to put the policy in place to make sure that company wants to be, be setting up shop in Detroit, and there needs to be pilot opportunities with those that have wastewater streams that need remediation, right? So putting this all together, it doesn't have to be an unintended consequence kind of situation. It can be a triple bottom line. Everyone gets to win. Mm-hmm. So, my advice would be move faster. Don't be afraid to take some risks. Mm-hmm. Lean in on these early stage companies because they will. The payback is pretty material from an economic development perspective.
Excellent. And so the last here is basically the private sector.
Yeah.
So the private sector, and you actually already mentioned yourself, the fact of, that's a great opportunity for them to actually start bolting on and start actually retrofitting their own companies. One, obviously for SDG goals and basically making sure from their kind of regulation perspective that they're up to code and basically kind of proceeding on that round. But what other advice would you actually give them, knowing that you have these corporate citizens and why they should be stepping into the kind of the sustainability realm more?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's one kind of a unique perspective on this, because I was literally the guy on the other side of the table, which, not most of the corporates aren't particularly well suited to engage with startups and B, doing innovation that's outside of their core. Those are two areas where they're not set up to win. And that's where we have a unique value proposition as well, because you're not engaging with some startup that's never going to get through your procurement processes, and you're getting your IT security sign off, all of that, those steps and gates that we put in place at the corporate level to engage with third parties that you're going to be paying money to. We play that role as a partner. We can bring innovation to the table, and ultimately, I think the question that you were getting to is when this is done right, there's a lot of value to be unlocked, and whether it's money being saved by managing your business more operationally efficiently, to innovations that are going to change the game for you. Those opportunities are out there, but again, most corporates are so focused on hitting their quarterly numbers and focused on their core business. They're not positioned to be successful here on their own, but they know they have to get there, and they have to do that cost effectively. And that's really where a partnership with Newlab can bear fruit, because we can do all the work and find all the startups that are looking to solve their exact problem statement, bring them to the table, and that's why 40% of them result in future activity. Like it's commercial activity. It's not. There's no donations happening here. They're engaged because it's the right thing for both of their businesses.
You have one of the most important voices in climate tech, especially here in New York City. And in that regard, just want to say again, thank you so much for
It's been a pleasure, guys.
sharing this advice, sharing these perspectives, especially for these different members of the audience, different stakeholder groups. But that is also from Cam in the position of CEO of Newlab. we can't let you go without learning a little bit more about Cam as a person, Cam the human. So more fun, less serious note, although maybe still with the same degree of zealotry depending on how you feel about food. On an evening where you don't have any work commitments,
Sure.
you get to have a dinner of your choice. Are you going out or are you cooking in? If you're cooking in, what are you cooking? If you're going out, where are you going and what are you ordering?
Oh, that's a good question. By the nature of the role I have to play, I travel a lot. So I'm spoiled with a lot of nice restaurants. So when I don't have to do that, I'm cooking for my family. I like to do homemade pasta from scratch, homemade sauces from scratch. So, like I find that, we are in a very connected world. The magic about cooking is it forces you to put your device down and just do stuff with your hands that does not involve a screen. So there's a little bit of therapy and therapy for the mind and the belly.
Yeah,
so yeah.
Absolutely. You can't chop onions while you're holding your cell phone.
That's right. That's right. You better not if you want to have all your fingers.
Is that a family recipe for that sauce, or is that?
I do a vodka sauce. It's pretty good.
Okay. We have to get that for you afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely speaking to Jacob's heart right there.
Yeah, there you go.
So now another great question is, now obviously you just rolled out into Detroit. What's your favorite Motown song or artist?
Oh my gosh, this is going to be really, really cringy because we were. I was lucky enough to see a lot of Detroit's best musicians a couple of weeks ago with the opening of Michigan Central, which is televised. You could probably watch it on TV as well. But there's music. You can always remember life moments with music. And I was fortunate enough to see Diana Ross. After the big show, she played in Michigan Central for a smaller group, and seeing her live at her age, you would not believe it. She was
Still got the pipes?
Still got the pipes. She was absolutely outstanding.
Oh, that's amazing.
See if we can get the rights to that music, and that'll be our
that'll be the outro.
Yeah, exactly. So the last of these questions is, again, for people to understand Cam the person, what is something that you think most people would find surprising about you?
Ooh. Yeah, well, this one's probably pretty good. I was actually one of the original, it's about a decade and a bit ago, Moneyball for hockey guys. So deep analytics to predict future player performance, which has been leveraged by a couple NHL clubs, our platform since then.
Wow.
So,
that is interesting. Were you a former player as well?
I was not. It's funny enough. It's typical Moneyball, I was not the Brad Pitt character, let's put it that way.
That's a good fact. That's interesting.
Yeah. So just trying to close off a few more of these. And again, trying to get more to you and really, at the end of the day, for our audience, like giving them some of your advice. So, like, what do you think you've actually done right in your career? What are things that you actually said, you know what, this probably I could have gone a different direction? And then what advice would you actually give people who are just now coming into the marketplace and looking for jobs?
Yeah, that is great advice. I think I've, for me, from a very, very early in my career, I've been always attracted to kind of high risk, high reward type of situation. You talk about life sciences. I spent a bunch of time in life sciences and e-commerce, and I was never attracted to the stable. I was always attracted to the burning building to a certain extent, and I think because of that risk tolerance, it accelerated my learning curve and helped me build experience faster. Which created more and more opportunities as my career progressed. So don't be afraid of being afraid.
There you go.
That's good. Get outside your comfort zone. Another way to say that.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think there's something that Ryan and I like to do, and for those who've worked with us at Gordon & Foster or been part of Planet for Session, they'll have probably seen this, is that we like to take a pause, because in this crazy busy world where everything is happening, it is very easy to overlook this and not do it, and just to pause and say thank you for not being just here today with us right now, but thank you for your service. Thank you for doing the work that you do. Thank you for being a part of the sustainability transition, the energy transition for, as you mentioned, working to build a future that our grandkids can be proud of. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
And thank you for the opportunity to chat with you both today. This has been awesome. And You're always welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much.
Be careful, we'll take you up on that.
Yeah, really.
And on that note, also a massive thank you to the entire Newlab team. And again, it's been just such a privilege to kick off the series here. We're looking forward to the rest of the episodes that are coming
Absolutely.
up.
And for those who actually want to learn more about what's going on here at Newlab and all the wonderful things that they're doing, certainly you can go to their website, which is newlab.com. You can also go to planetfirstaction.com. You also, all both those links will be in the notes. And again, want to express our sincere thank you for being able to join us, and we're looking forward to seeing your progress and success.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and we're also going to put a link to Diana Ross, and we're going to encourage everyone that's listening. Everyone that's listening in, please do all of the good social things, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, send this on social media. It really does make a big difference. And we're also very excited to share that this is the first of the series, and we encourage you all to tune in next week. We have a fantastic guest that's going to be joining us. His name's Tony Kearns, the founding partner of Purpose Venture Group, who are doing incredible work. Another member of this ecosystem that's helping bring capital into those companies that are really on the front lines of impact and sustainability. And so it's going to be a fantastic conversation. I know Ryan and I are really looking forward to it, and it's going to be same time next week.
Thank you all for joining us. Looking forward to it for next week, and we'll see you then.
Thank you again, Cam.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.